Okay. Okay. Okay, right. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for once again for joining us in our monthly research essential UB Research Essential series. As you all are aware, for fall 2021, we have started this series of workshops or more of a sharing session on the trends and research opportunities in many different fields. We have already done 2 fields, the creative works and arts, and we also focused in our last session on business and hospitality and tourism studies. So today we are here to look at another trends that many of you may be keen to understand, to look at the opportunities and trends in research in natural sciences and nursing. So we have today with us 2 very eminent researcher and scholar, Dr. Susannah, who is the Dean of Pure and Applied Sciences at UB, and her field of expertise is very much in biochemistry. And then we also have Dr. Jacinth Lindo, who's a Fulbright scholar from the University of Central Florida. And it's a pleasure to have her with us in our session today. Her background is very much on nursing and public health. So I'm really hoping that a lot of those of you who are in the nursing side, especially, will also log in to this session live, or even to look at our recording later. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over the session to Dr. Gal and Dr. Lindo to get the session started. Over to you.
Thank you, Dean Vic, and I appreciate the opportunity to talk a little bit about this. And in your final official duty, one of your final official duties as the Dean of Research and Graduate Studies. So Dr. Lindo and I talked a little bit about the options of what to talk about today. And we decided to focus primarily on interdisciplinary research in science and nursing. And so we're going to talk about some examples of that, how we think it's a really advantage in general, and a lot of the challenges that we have faced either in our own fields or we've read about and found studies about. So again, my name is Susannah Gal. I'm a PhD in biochemistry and the Dean. So one of the things that I get to do in my off time is quilt. And this is one of my quilts, and it's to sort of represent the value of combining different things together. And in this case, it's different fabrics, different colors, different shapes. And by putting these things together, you get something even more beautiful than the things separately. And so the idea is that interdisciplinary research is kind of like that. And so what we'd like you to do first in the chat, if you want, or unmute, what do you consider interdisciplinary research? What does that mean to you?
So we are going to allow you a few minutes to write what you think interdisciplinary research might be.
And there may be other kinds of terms. I've heard also transdisciplinary, multidisciplinary.
All right. Okay. Well, I'm going to share with you the definitions of the NSF and NIH. So according to the National Science Foundation, interdisciplinary research is a mode of research by teams or individuals that integrates information, data, techniques, tools, perspectives, concepts, and or theories from 2 or more disciplines or bodies of specialized knowledge to advance fundamental understanding or to solve problems whose solutions are beyond the scope of a single discipline or area of research practice. So I've highlighted similar aspects or concepts that are included in the NIH definition, which is it integrates the analytical strengths of two or more often disparate scientific disciplines to solve a given biological problem. And so our goal today is to discuss the role of interdisciplinary research in science and in nursing. And we want to talk about the advantages and some of the challenges. So why is interdisciplinary research valuable? We think that interdisciplinary research is valuable because it pushes fields towards an accelerated scientific discovery, which may transcend the scope of a single discipline or program. It promotes innovation, and multiple agencies afford interdisciplinary research a high priority. So they would offer multiple specific solicited and unsolicited interdisciplinary research opportunities for funding. And we're quoting from Toby et al. Here. So this particular image, we thought would represent how interdisciplinary nursing can be valuable in healthcare. And so you will note that here the central focus of the picture is it's nursing visible in multidisciplinary team providing collaborative care for a person with a stroke. So on this team, note there is a nurse, a doctor, dietitian, physiotherapist, and a social worker. And we wanted to highlight this because each person or each discipline comes with their own perspective. So for example, your nurse is concerned about the fact that there may be impaired mobility for the stroke patient and that this patient might be at risk for falls. The nutritionist, on the other hand, is wondering whether or not the patient will be provided with adequate nutritional, an adequate nutritional or dietary plan, while the physical therapist is thinking about the muscle strength or motor function of the patient. The social worker is thinking about the discharge planning, etc. And of course, the doctor is thinking about tests and medications that he or she may want to order. So collectively, the team ensures that the client has the best outcome. So we wanted to share some examples of research can strengthen practice. In this particular paper, which was done in Jamaica, nurses collaborated with physicians to determine what would be the best configuration of the triage team in the emergency room at a hospital in Kingston, Jamaica. And so we started off with a team of nurses and a team of physicians, or that's not true, let me restate that. We started off by looking at what was the waiting time and patient satisfaction in emergency departments, in the emergency department, and saw that that was a source of great dissatisfaction among patients. And so we attempted to address the waiting time based on the construction or the way that the triage team was constructed, whether it was a team of nurses or whether it had a physician on the team. And we controlled for some variables like whether or not the clients had lab work done or x-rays or any other procedures. This particular study showed that the configuration of the team, whether it had a physician on it or not, did not change the length of the waiting time, nor did it change the client's satisfaction with the service. What the factors that were in fact critical to the length to the waiting time was whether or not the client had had laboratory work or needed an X-ray, a CAT scan, etc. And so this particular proposal or project assisted us in making an informed decision about how we would configure the emergency room, the triage teams in the emergency room. And we ended up keeping the team of nurses because, as you know, if we added a physician to the team, it probably cost more, and the physician probably could assist in seeing additional patients more efficiently. And so we thought that this was a good example to show how, by working together, collaborating as a team to do research, we were able to have positive outcomes for our clients. In this other example, we're looking at the application of nursing, computer science, and electrical engineering to affect teaching. And here, the teams collaborated to create a physical virtual patient simulator. And this work is being done by my colleagues at the University of Central Florida. And you could see here the nurses are assisting, helping, providing guidance to the computer scientists and vice versa, ensuring that the learning experience is enhanced. And now I'm gonna hand over to Dr. Gal.
So we have a question in the chat, Dr. Lindo, and I wonder, before you switch over, is interdisciplinary research a prevailing trend now in nursing, do you think?
I would say yes, as is across many disciplines in the last 2 decades. I believe that it is a greater trend, and particularly for healthcare, because we can see how by collaborating across disciplines, we can advance science, and it makes us better practitioners as nurses. Currently at the University of Central Florida, there's also another team of persons working with engineering and trying to, we have a gerontologist that's a nurse that specializes in gerontology, and she's looking at falls. And so they're trying to develop mechanical ways that we can prevent falls among clients. So yes, I would say that it is that interdisciplinary science is a trend that we're hoping to benefit from.
And in terms of science, I think there is lots of research that's still going on in the silos, Dr. Micklewhite, but it is much more common to have these. And we'll explain a little bit some of the pressures on that. For instance, right now, here's an example where I was doing some work with a mathematician. They had a problem, and I had a way to solve it using my biological expertise. So that was, not possible for the mathematicians to do. And so we worked together, and I was able to support them in that. And so that's another example. And that particular field is called DNA computing, and it is pretty expensive and doing a lot more than what is described here. I found this other one just to give another example. And I think we had a couple of great examples last Friday at the Research Edge. Both Dr. Kunta and Dr. Kabir had some really nice interdisciplinary examples of research that they were conducting. So it is happening also with researchers, faculty on our campus. So in this other example that I have from science, there's they're evaluating brain waves and electrical stimulation in bats, and they're trying to see how that vocalization is linked to that and is a communication device. And so you've got to have people putting in neural monitors, and you've got to have somebody watching and tracking the bats, collecting the sounds, evaluating the signals, and putting these things together. So that's a way to do that. The other thing that happens a lot in my field of biochemistry, molecular biology, biomedical science is a lot of the instruments and the techniques are very expensive to do individually. And so by collaborating, people have found ways so that they don't each have to buy a major piece of equipment. They don't each have to be experts in their particular area or use the technique. And so by combining people from different disciplines, you actually can do better, a different kind of research because you don't each have to buy the instrument. Okay, so these are some of the examples we have for that and some of the advantages. But we're going to also cover some of the challenges. So on the next slide, it is not easy to cross a discipline and decide what is research and what is your approach to research. And a little bit later, we're going to have a survey that we want you to engage with to give us some insight as to how those values and approaches affect it. But for instance, in the math and biology one, math, they could develop a theory, and that's not the approach that I would use in biochemistry. I had to do experiments. I had to get into the lab and get results. And so it was a very different approach to research. And that, without realizing it, could cause friction. And we'll talk a little more about that. So it also made, what makes for a good research problem. And Dr. Lindo has a couple of examples related to that.
Right, so absolutely, we could see that this is an area that would be influenced by the discipline, the skills, and the competence of the scientists involved. And so we're going to talk a little bit more about this as we go along. We also feel that some of the challenges would include discipline wanting to publish in one journal versus another. So for example, the paper I showed you at the beginning with the team of nurses and physicians, the team wanted to publish in a medical journal, the West Indian Medical Journal. And that took some time. We ended up retracting the paper from the medical journal and sending it to a nursing journal, where the paper was published with great ease. And so, this journal also had a higher impact factor than the West Indian Medical Journal. So that worked out okay. Another thing that you could consider is the order of authorship. So different disciplines might want to, so for example, for bench scientists, they tend to put the senior person at the end of the list of authors. So for example, if you publish with a student or with a junior faculty, you would put your name as the lead or head of this group. You put your name at the end. For nursing, you would want to get your name in the second place. The senior person on the list of authors would go second beyond the PhD student or junior faculty, whoever you're collaborating with. And so these are some differences. We also read that interdisciplinary research can be challenging for early career researchers. So that if you're at the beginning of your career, you might not have a team that you're working with, and it might be more difficult for you to leverage relationships which you haven't yet built. So this systematic review looked at, I think, 48 articles that were focused on interdisciplinary research. And they cited some other factors that could influence the relationships. They discussed challenges that were encountered. So for example, they spoke about team factors such as communication and the leadership, and whether or not there were trust issues. Persons from time to time will have an idea and they'll say somebody might have stolen their ideas. It's can be challenging sharing your thoughts and being honest when you're working in a team. Environmental and institutional factors such as explicit institutional commitment to the interdisciplinary work, or to they may or may not be sufficient resources. And so of all the studies that were reviewed, 55% of them indicated that this was an issue. Fewer articles indicated that individual characteristics of the team, such as whether or not the team members had high levels of commitment, or if they were flexible, or whether they were engaged, being agreeable to work with. Other thing so one of the areas that we mentioned before is communication, and we thought we'd just expound on this one concept, just to show how this can sometimes be, it could be a simple issue, but it could have a significant impact.
and that sort of speaks also toward Dr. Vick's question. You know, is it easier to get things published when it's interdisciplinary? It can be, but you have to, each of the professions has a specific language and a jargon. And so that can be a challenge for people to write it in a way that crosses those disciplines. All people understand it and understand it. I don't offhand know the articles, you know, sort of the citations. We have some examples a little bit later about the funding, but I think there are more and more journals that are accepting and using interdisciplinary research. But it can be hard, and we'll have a couple examples of geographic location. But one of the things we might consider, Vic, in the future is a communication workshop. I've done a couple of different ones where how you learn to talk across broad disciplines about your research, because that can be hard. Most of the time we're talking within our discipline. And so we're not always aware of the jargon we're using.
Yes.
So there's also a question about author. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to share something about geographic location and the communication.
Mhm.
So recently, I've been working with a team of nurse researchers from across the Caribbean and UK. And so we scheduled a 3 o'clock meeting. It was 3 o'clock. I think the people in Jamaica are 3 o'clock, and here it was 4 o'clock. And we've been talking for some time when the people from the UK said, "You guys, do you know it's 11:30 p.m.?" And it might be as simple as that. We hadn't really thought about the time, and so anyway, so now we're having the meetings at 7 o'clock in the morning. Go ahead, Susannah.
That's fine. And somebody asked that, you know, it may be certain conventions in different locations. I know what it's like in the United States and what's sort of expected in my discipline. But it's good to keep that in mind. And there's also a growing trend in my discipline to have marking both, if there's equal contribution of the first two authors, to actually mark that, because that can make a big difference for recognition, you know, maybe degree status. So I think let's step forward, because we want to get to the survey and sort of understanding some of these differences. So can we skip this one? I don't know. You want to? So
yeah,
go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, like, so one of the ways of making it easier or is to ensure that you acknowledge the differences. And I also wanted to encourage us to look at that using a framework might be helpful. So in this particular framework, the authors suggest that you ensure that there's agreement about the way forward before you begin. And that's, I think, the biggest takeaway from this particular methodology of interdisciplinary research framework is to ensure that there is adequate discussion, acknowledgement of some of the challenges, and then moving forward.
And that fits really well with the survey that we want to try and have you complete. So I've just posted in the chat, and we'll describe it a little more, but this is, if you go to that link that's in the chat, you can start a survey. It's a short set of questions, but this was a survey that a colleague did at the College of Medicine at Penn State University in Hershey, Pennsylvania, and I worked with her on a workshop related to this. But different disciplines have different approaches to what they think is an important problem, how they're motivated. There are a lot more questions than we've posted, but what I want you to do, if you can, click on that link or use the QR code and answer based on your research, based on your discipline, about these particular questions. And we'll hopefully share some of those insights with everyone. So hopefully you've been able to get to that site. So it's asking, how do you collect the information for your research? What types of information do you collect? I'm not seeing people responding yet. So I don't know whether people are, yes, it is the same survey that you had a link before, to Virginia. So my friend would do this with the interdisciplinary teams in the College of Medicine to help them be really successful through having some of the discussions about some of these differences. Okay, so I've got 3 responses. Wait a couple more minutes. Couple more seconds. Okay, so let me just share what we've got so far.
I'm going to stop sharing.
Mhm. So a good bunch of you use a combination of different ways, doing experiments. And a few of you are observing or people or documents. A lot of you are doing a combination of qualitative and quantitative research. Now, in my field of biochemistry, it would almost all be quantitative. We don't use qualitative very often. But of course, lots of researchers do a combination. One of the interesting, how do you validate the observations? Do you repeat the same method, or do you try a different method or approach? And a lot of you use both. In my field, it's often using a different method because we feel that sometimes methods can be prone to certain biases and things like that. And then this is an interesting thing. So, values as part of the research. Some people feel that that's really important to include, and others, I think, research should be value-free, as some of you said. So it does affect this kind of thing, and you can see that we've got a good somewhat broader distribution of people doing the research are represented here. And so it's nice to have that sort of thing. And so we've got a kind of a representation of how the different disciplines see these differences across it. And again, the full survey has many more questions. And what she would do is, after she would have them complete that, she would have them discuss about what they feel and observe and share, because as Dr. Lindo said earlier, that's part of getting a team to work functionally well, okay? So yeah, no research is value-free though. Whether you acknowledge it or not, I think you're right. That's an important distinction. But I think that's part of the discussion and why I think it's important to scout and share in your interdisciplinary team. So we have a few more slides, and then we can open it up for questions and insights. So, and we'll be able to share the full information, but there's actually a whole big research area called the science of teams, or team science. And they are studying ways to improve the functioning of teams. There's again a big recognition that, at least in science and other areas, teams are really important, and not just for research. As we'll have an example later, Google is doing a lot of research on teams because they use teams all the time for things. So it does provide an opportunity, but the challenges are, in the time required for communication and coordination of the work. And I think Dr. Lindo had already mentioned one of the challenges that she found with that.
So we're continuing the goals of team science. We want to enhance the effectiveness of the collaborative research process research has demonstrated that shared understanding of team goals and members' roles are related to team effectiveness. We want to foster a positive team, enhance team effectiveness through, as Dr. Gal just suggested, the team composition and assembling the right individuals, team professional development, and team leadership. Specific recommendations have been made to approach each of these. And the US National Academy of Sciences, where this information is coming from. The Google study that was referred to before, Project Aristotle, here they looked at 180 teams over a 5-year period, and they decided that it really wasn't the quality of the team members, but more whether or not the process or the way in which the teams met had psychological safety. They felt like team members needed to feel comfortable in order to share their views. So the environment needed to be judgment-free. They felt like team members should be dependable. Team members should get things done on time and meet expectations. There should be structure and clarity. When teams have clear goals and have well-defined roles within the group, you'll have a better outcome. And the work should have personal significance to each of the members of the team. Finally, the belief that their work is purposeful and will positively impact the greater good is also an important element. With respect to funding, interdisciplinary research gets more money and more publications. Well, this is certainly what the literature in Europe appears to indicate. So for example, here's an older article indicating that interdisciplinary communities attract more funding, on average £57,000 per researcher per year versus £36,000 per researcher per year. And that 93% of interdisciplinary research communities cooperate with external partners, whereas only 71% of monodisciplinary communities would do that. However, that trend doesn't appear to be across the globe. So that this particular study published by Young and Zhang et al., they used big data as a proxy measure for interdisciplinary work. And you can see that there is actually, since 2010, I would say, that you can see that there is an increase in the number of funded interdisciplinary projects. So here, NSF, this is the US agency, and this is a Chinese agency. And you can see that there is growth across from 2011 to 2015. And I believe that the trend continues. So to the question before, we are now in terms of NSF awards for interdisciplinary teams, up to 132 million, as opposed to in Chinese, they're at 22 million. But the trajectory appears to be growing. Mm-hmm.
And so we found a few quotes from some of the funding agencies, seeing that they can address important research problems. And I like the quote from the NIH that actually within traditional divisions or disciplines that can impede the pace of discovery. And they really feel that you need to expand and encourage and reward those other ones. And the UK Energy Research Center really felt that it was almost impossible to expand and to support or get past some of the challenges we're facing if we don't use interdisciplinary research. So the last slide really is the segue into the value of how librarians, who are actually interdisciplinary researchers by their very nature, are great ways to support your interdisciplinary research. And they can help you find information, connect to teams and resources, experts, and help to improve collaboration and communication strategies. So with this, we'd love to have the librarians that are supporting both nursing and all of the fields represented by pure and applied sciences give you a little bit of how they're doing that, introduce themselves, and tell you how they can help you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Gal and Dr. Lindo. I'm going to share my screen to introduce. Okay, did it share? Okay, share. Yes, we have in the library a liaison program where each person is assigned a subject area. And we can be effective members of research teams because we often have an undergraduate degree or master's degree, and even in some cases, PhD degrees in disciplines outside of library and information science. So there's really a perception that, oh, you're just a librarian, when in fact they could be an integral part of a team. I think this was discovered particularly in evidence-based medicine. They realized that librarians or information scientists, maybe we should be called, are key members of the team when they're doing systematic reviews of the literature, because they know how literature is organized, they know what to look for, they're familiar with the language of the discipline and so on. So in a way, we have tried to embrace this concept of interdisciplinary research at the university by having assigned librarians for different schools or disciplines. And there's one of our LibGuides is devoted to that, to try to raise the people's awareness of what we can do. And it's just by chance my picture shows up because this picture will rotate depending on each time you visit it. As Dr. Gal suggested, yes, librarians usually have a very broad background in addition to a subject specialty. And we need that because you never know what kind of question is going to come to your plate. I don't want to take up much time because we need time for questions. I do want to just announce that the library has been trying to be responsive to the needs of our researchers and students. If we look at the A to Z list of databases on the library's webpage, on the right side, there are new databases that have just been acquired by the library. Some of them are through our EBSCO databases. And then we have a brand new database for nursing called From Ovid, and it's nursing journals. And it's also MCare, which is like MBase, which Dr. Gal would be familiar with, but MCare is for health. So we have access to that database as well as full text to about 30 new nursing journals. So that's just the new stuff in the library relating to nursing and the sciences. We have new engineering database and applied science and technology. These were two fields that were desperate for years and years to have some specialized database. So that's it from me. Thank you very much for inviting me to speak.
So are there any additional, thank you, additional questions, comments? I see Dean Nair, yes, there are funding bodies that only fund interdisciplinary research, as well as journals that only publish in that way, as well as single discipline specific. Part of that, I think, and I don't know whether Dr. Lindo wants to comment that. For me, part of the challenge is how the disciplines, how to review interdisciplinary research and articles, because each person, individual, is coming often with their own disciplinary lens, and it can be hard to review another article across a discipline if you're not in that sort of mindset. And so I think that's still a shift that the research communities need to do, and it can be hard.
Yes, I think that it's evolving and that they understand. In fact, they said that one of the reasons initially why interdisciplinary work was not funded as well as monodisciplinary was because persons, if you are reviewing a paper, you know your own discipline. It's easier for you to make an appropriate appraisal of something in your discipline. But when you have to look at it across disciplines, that it often causes bias to be introduced in the process. The literature suggests that there is a gap in terms of how we evaluate and appraise interdisciplinary work, and that we need some structure. That's an evolving science, and it doesn't help that the concept itself. There are varying terms that we use for interdisciplinary research, but I think particularly in health, nursing, that we're recognizing that it is a valuable discipline and that it can contribute significantly to the health outcomes of patients.
The other thing that I found in my discipline is that my colleagues in biology didn't really understand why it was important to my collaboration with the mathematicians. They just, and so it actually was a little bit of a challenge when I was coming up for promotion. So
Dr. Micklewhite is asking, what in your opinion are the dynamics between scientists, nursing researchers as part of a team? So we are this can change across depending on where you are practicing. So let's say in the US, in North America, the nurse researcher might have a little bit more, she has more expertise than, let's say, a nurse researcher in the Caribbean. And that's just a function of the level of expertise that might be available. And there are some other dynamics, we tend to be in a paternalistic society in the region where, faculty of medical sciences might be, it's usually led by physicians and they tend to be males, and, there are some relationship dynamics that come into play in the team science.
And in terms of researchers, that's part of what team science is trying to study. How does gender, how do different status in terms of your position at the university or your level, your experience, how those have impacted. And I know one of she's a business researcher at my former institution at Penn State. She wrote an article that basically said, women are great for teams because they build collaborations, but not always do the teams support the women, because when often the observation is women in teams don't get the credit necessarily for their work. And so that is a real caveat for some types of researchers to think about. When you put together a team, how are you helping make sure that all of the voices are heard as part of that team's discussion, evaluation, moving forward. And I think the Google study is a really good example because it shows that you need everybody's voice in that. Thank you for the question.
Yes.
Yes, but I would just add to that very often the librarian who may have saved the day by finding a study which the team had missed, that they spent 3 months doing their survey or study and then had, found that they hadn't done a good literature review, and this saved the day, and they don't even get a mention. So
thank you for raising that.
Yeah, so how best do you imagine that a team should incorporate the librarian? I think you kind of general say, but if a team were to approach you now, what would you like them to do?
Well, I would be, let's say I was invited, I would want to see what they've done in terms of the literature review, the strengths that I can bring. how they're managing their data management, because that's a big problem. Did they back it up? Have they named the files? Are they able to retrieve them? Are they able to read, the whole field of research data management? And then where are they looking to possibly publish their studies? Are they choosing the most appropriate journals for the field, and that kind of thing? And just having like being behind the scenes, trying to make sure it's all stayed on, and that it's going to be successful.
Right, and then, as you said, finding articles that might be appropriate to share with the team.
Well, ensuring that the literature review was thorough and properly documented, because very often they spend a lot of time whizzing around doing the same thing over and over again.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree, Dean Vic, that the business and tourism examples you gave a couple of weeks ago, those are also very interdisciplinary, right? They're crossing the boundaries. And I'd love for I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to offer to hear from Dr. Micklewhite, whose research is in education, how she sees education research moving or trending or using interdisciplinary ideas or approaches. And I maybe you're giving a talk in a couple weeks. Oops.
Oh, she has to be
Unmuted.
unmuted.
And I think I can't.
Michael, what you can unmute.
Okay, good afternoon, colleagues. Yes, thanks, Dr. Gallant. Yes, I will be presenting very shortly, so that will definitely come up. But we have traditionally, as you know, in education and the social sciences, we have always held to interdisciplinary work almost as a philosophical underpinning of what we do, because we tend to study human subjects, and we tend to study problems that run across disciplines just because of the nature of education and the nature of social sciences. So we have always been interdisciplinary in that sense. Now, can we involve more persons or expertise in the other areas? Certainly. One of the areas I think, and I actually have that as a part of my presentation, but I don't want to jump ahead, is a focus on more specific types of quantitative studies that can help to validate a lot more of what we, it's kind of like we already know, but sometimes we need the data to support it. So yes, interdisciplinary studies is something we've always held to. I don't know if we can do something without it. So it's, and that is hence some of my questions earlier about the trend of science and nursing. You know, I'm a scientist as well. I'm a science educator, so I have been in both fields, and that was very difficult for me actually, particularly when I was doing graduate studies in education. Coming out of that quantitative mindset, it was a radical transformation for me. But I had to make the leap, and I'm glad I did.
So from a quantitative to a qualitative approach.
Right.
So can you tell us more about what made that challenge, what made that hard?
I would say because oftentimes we work in laboratories in silos, we're protective of our data. We sometimes we're not always open to questioning, you know, our data, and yeah, just the nature of what we do as scientists, I think sometimes, and I think you alluded to that a little bit earlier too, Dr. Gall, it's just the way that we do things, our methodology. And so coming out of that and having to open yourself to the opinions and of others, and also looking at other factors that might not always be captured quantitatively.
Right.
Okay, and so having to do that meant, like I said, it was a radical transformation for me, paradigm shift, as they say. But I'm glad I did, and it's really helped me to grow as an educator and as a researcher.
Yeah, for me to go to a qualitative, it's very tough. It's just not, I'm not comfortable in my ability to analyze things qualitatively.
Right, right.
So I wanted to share a similar experience. My initial master's and PhD is in public health, and then I went to the School of Nursing and got a master's in nursing education. In public health, it was mainly quantitative, and we were not as focused on, let's say, doing a concept analysis. Nursing had way more theoretical courses that would cause me to have to pay attention to the concept. And then I did a master's in education as well. And there I got the qualitative perspective like you're describing. And so I think that each of the discipline has value. I am who I am today because I've had that varied experience. And even some of my research skills, the competencies that I have, I got them from public health because there really aren't as many mentors in nursing. So I brought that skill set over. So it's, I think interdisciplinary work really is, can be beneficial to all of the members of the team because I never saw some of my weaknesses until I actually studied in the various settings. And then I was able to recognize that this wasn't so. I mean, I completed a PhD and I learned way more philosophy teaching PhD students at Barry because their nursing PhD program they had 9 credits of philosophy. So, I just wanted to share that.
Shamala, thank you. Dr. Lindo. Shamala, I'm sorry, you put down your hand, but would you like to still ask your question?
Well, actually, it wasn't necessarily a question. I think
Okay.
I wanted to follow up on what Dr. Micklewhite had talked about, but Dr.
Great.
Lindo kind of alluded to it as well. I think that when we're talking about interdisciplinary research, you would have touched on quite a number of the challenges. And I'm happy that you yourself, Dr. Lindo, and even Dr. Micklewhite have been honest enough to say that you've been uncomfortable. I think part of the challenge is that the main, and what I'm continuing to learn in a PhD program is because of what scientists consider to be the received view with objectivity, management, quantification, that type of thing as the most reliable, most valid source of empirical data.
Mhm.
It then makes anything else appear less than. And so when you have disciplines who might use more qualitative methods versus quantitative, it's almost like it's not on an even footing. Even when you are doing what is called mixed methods research, then you need to decide if they will be done simultaneously, if you will do quant first and follow it with qual, how will the results be aggregated or disaggregated. And oftentimes what I have been finding is that the quant results tend to take precedent, particularly if it's a mixed methods paper. And so even in the discipline of nursing itself, I think there are challenges to push and pull. Part of it is because, and I see it even in undergrad programs, students don't learn about qualitative research. They only learn about quantitative research because we are still operating primarily under a medical model. So, I think that as we talk about interdisciplinary research and creating teams and stuff, a good understanding of what each one brings to the table, how, as you indicated, Dr. Gal, how each voice can be heard equally and how each methodology might be valued equally as well to improve whatever it is, because feelings matter in addition to numbers. Thank you.
Yeah, for sure. I guess the other challenge for me is it's relative, or I'm more used to seeing graphs and tables and, numerical representations. What are good ways that qualitative research has of presenting a lot of information? And And so I wonder how much that plays into the discussion as well.
Well, Dr. Gal, I'm just butting in here. I don't know if you've taken a good qual course when you look at things like grounded theory and triangulation and all of those other qualitative methods of analyzing data. I tell you, it was truly wonderful. It was truly a wonderful experience
Great.
to begin to understand how truths, if I could use that term, can be fleshed out
Mhm.
using all of those other methodologies, not
Right.
just the hard numbers, which in many cases I was forced to see, as my professor said to me, that the numbers cannot tell the story. You have to have those focus groups. You know, you have to have that triangulation. You have to look at grounded theory. You have to look at other ways of fleshing out that data. And so, as I said again, it's been a paradigm shift for me, but a wonderful one. And now I have experience in both areas, and I can use
Great.
either one. So I like the mixed method.
Great. Well, I want to follow up with you on what you recommend for a qualitative research kind of course or training. Thank you all. This is great. I've learned a lot myself. I appreciate the opportunity. And thank you, Dean Vic.
Thank you. Thank you so much for the interesting discussion. And indeed, I think moving forward, interdisciplinary research is becoming more and more important. I myself I work in a lot of interdisciplinary research. By virtue of me working in a lot of tourism related projects, I have to cut across many disciplines. So in fact, one of the largest project that I managed just before I took up my tenure in UB was when I headed an interdisciplinary research team. It was one of the biggest projects that was awarded in Malaysia. We had about we were awarded a $9 million project on rural tourism, and I led the project where we had both social scientists and the natural scientists were there working across, because there's the science aspect of tourism there, and there's also the social aspect of tourism when we talk about rural tourism development. So it cuts across many disciplines. Of course, it was a challenge because everyone has their own boundaries in terms of their discipline. And as the program leader, it becomes very key to pull everyone together. But what was good about this project is it produced huge number of publication. It was a 5 years project. At the end of 5 years, we published almost 150 journal articles in high impact journal articles.
Wow.
Yeah, so it was one of the most successful project. We graduated close to about 15 PhD students came out of that project, and all of them focus on rural tourism, but you get people focusing on the different aspect of tourism, the social economic aspect, the environmental aspect, then you have the economic impact coming in, and then you have someone who's coming in the technology aspect, because we came up with the technology to manage that. So it was really cutting through many disciplines, and I see the value of interdisciplinary research, and maybe moving forward, which what I put in the chat, and interdisciplinary based programs. I think moving forward, you will have maybe a bachelor degree program that cuts across many disciplines, not just focus on a particular discipline. So I think that's where maybe post-pandemic, there's a change happening in higher education scene now, and you may see that coming through in many programs across the globe. So thank you to both of you for opening our eyes and having us discuss interdisciplinary research, and we really value your sharing today. And I'm sure in our next session we are going to be having almost similar discussion, but very much focused on in a different area. So although the numbers today are very small, but we will ensure that this link is sent out to as many people, because I think today's presentation is really important in the way how we move forward as far as research is concerned. So thank you once again, Dr. Gal, Dr. Lindo, and also Ms. Ballance for the discussion today. And we hope to have this session going through even with my with me leaving the university, but this session will still go through. I will still try to at least get the fall sessions to complete, although I passed my tenure by then, but I will still make sure that this is ends correctly and completely. And we do hope moving forward in the coming semester, we will have similar sessions, and maybe someone else can take the lead after that. So
So
thank you.
what day is that?
The next session will be I don't have the date over here. I think the next one is
November 18th?
November 18, I think, yes, if I'm not mistaken. I will release the flyers soon. We will get the
Okay,
flyers
great.
out, and
It's her and Dr.
and-
Moxie? No, is that?
the next one, wait, let me
Sorry.
just see. I
Anyway.
have it here. The next session is on December 3rd. Okay,
It's later.
is
Okay.
December 3rd, yes. Is focus on education and social sciences. So with Dr. Michael White and also Dr. Nicolette Bethel.
Bethel, great.
Yes, the last session after that, December 10th, is Dr. Andrew Moxie and
Okay.
Dr. Williamson Gustave that focus on environment and life sciences. So we have actually covered most of the disciplines, and we do hope at the end of this fall, you've heard from all the discipline, and maybe it's time to see how you can bring all the discipline together in an interdisciplinary project or transdisciplinary project, whichever, whatever you call it. But I think what is key is to work together to solve a problem. Okay, so because most problems are not discipline based, so it is cutting across, and indeed that is the way forward for us. All right,
Thank
then.
you.
So thank you once again. So do take care, and we will meet in some other forum or in my other capacity soon. So
Yes.
bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Lindo. Thank you, Dr.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Good afternoon,
Bye-bye.
all. Bye-bye.
Good afternoon. Bye-bye.